Hello, and welcome to our fundraiser livestream event for Aromantic Spectrum Awareness Week, ASAW 2024. I'll let people join in the chat and hang out for a moment before getting to housekeeping. We're also dealing with a bit of technical issues, so for now, we'll just hang around. And as we're waiting, let me know where you're joining from. And are you Aerospec? I'll try to catch any questions and in the chat and answer as best as I can. We'll also be sharing some Q&A that we've received through a submission form that we posted earlier this month during breaks in the chat. And as a reminder to everyone to please be respectful of everyone in the chat, as well as to our guests and speakers, and as well as to the team. All right, we've got somebody from the US. Welcome. Where are other folks coming in from? From Kentucky, welcome. Oh, Mexico. Bienvenido. Wisconsin, lots of US folks. This is the time zone that is best suited for the Americas. We will be throughout the live stream also sharing how much we've managed to raise. We did start fundraising, and at the moment we have raised $400.43, which is very exciting. Oh, some folks from Italy and Russia. All right. Well, I'll just let people keep streaming in. And for now, we can get into the swing of things. Good time zone to everyone. I'm Anyang, coming to you from the Netherlands. I'm aromantic and queer, and my pronouns are she, her, hers, or AMers. I'm Aria's volunteer onboarder, and here on behalf of ARIA, which stands for the Aromantic Spectrum Union for Recognition, Education, and Advocacy. We're a volunteer-run online organization that connects aromantics together, provide resources for AROs and allies, and advocates for AROs in broad conversations about inclusion. For our event, we'll have a couple of hosts. There's me, who will be with you for the first half. Then I'll pass the baton over to our other facilitator in the second half. We're also joined by Juniper Casaway and Jay Raby, our American Sign Language ASL interpreters. You should see them spotlighted throughout the event. Thank you to Pro Bono ASL for providing ASL access, and a big thank you to PrideNet for funding the ASL access. We also have captions available. We have a few ARIA team members behind the scenes in the chat, working away to fix any technical issues. Thank you to everyone who has helped and is currently helping put this event together. And the purpose of this event is to celebrate Aromantic Spectrum Awareness Week. The point of this week is to spread awareness of aromantic experiences across the spectrum of the identity. Aromantic describes people who experience little to no romantic attraction to others, or whose experience of romance is disconnected from normative societal expectations. The societal concept of romance is experienced queerly and differently by many of us around the world. That actually brings me to a question that was submitted to us earlier through one of our submissions forms by Rebecca on signs that could prove if someone is aromantic. There are lists online of signs that you might be aromantic, but at the end of the day, whether or not someone is aromantic is personal, and especially as aromanticism is a spectrum, experiences can vary. There are some signs that many aros relate to, such as not experiencing crushes or being disinterested in romance, but they're not necessarily universal hard signs that would prove or disprove someone is aromantic. There's no straightforward answer here, which I'm sure some folks would like to have one. And to move on more about our event today, we've invited some folks we've been collaborating with on aromantic research and projects. It's been a very exciting time, and we're grateful for the opportunity to help expand knowledge on aromanticism. We're also running a fundraiser with this event. We subsist on donations from the community, including us ourselves. If you would like to support us in our fundraising today, the link to donate is in the description below this video, and it'll be in the chat. It's aromanticism.org/en/donate. Again, aromanticism.org/en/donate. The proceeds will go to fundraising, our web costs and organizational expenses, and our goal for today is to raise $600. No pressure to donate if you can't at the moment. There are a lot of other ways to get involved, including just being here or volunteering with us. If you do donate, thank you immensely for your support. You can see where our money goes in our publicly available financial reports each year. I also wanted to take a moment for some housekeeping updates from Aurea. It's been a busy time for many of us, and we've had quite some changes in the team. That said, we are still very much in need of new team members, such as a webmaster, a fundraiser, treasurer, and many more. We've been busy with preparing to become a nonprofit organization, and for that to happen, we need a bigger team. So please consider joining. Again, you can find the link in the video description and in the chat. Additionally, our website is now equipped with an accessibility toolbar, which is very exciting. Lastly, our newsfeed team is working on a piece about ASAW and is collecting input from the community. If you want to share the thoughts, fill in the form linked in the chat. You can also keep an eye on our social media, for the form will be posted in the next couple of days. With that, we can get into the schedule for the event. So we'll first start with a presentation from PrideNet. Then we'll have a quick 5-minute break. And from there, we'll have a second presentation on the aromatic census. Following that, we'll have a 10-minute break, and then I'll pass facilitation over to our other facilitator. And then we'll have a third set of presentations from Aero UQ. At the end, we'll conclude and let you know how much we raised this year. We should go on until about 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. In the meantime, we encourage you to chat, talk with each other, or ask us questions while you're here. As a note, this is a live event, so that means that anything can happen to disrupt the event. So we ask you to be respectful of everyone in chat as well as to our guests and facilitators. There are Aurea team members helping to moderate the chat. And thank you for your patience as we work out any kinks along the process. And without further ado, we will be starting with our first speaker, Cassie, who will be talking about a project on aromantic health concerns, attitudes towards research, community experiences, and more. Aurea had the honor of contributing to this work, and we're super excited for the results to be presented. Let's have Cassie join us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm going to bring my slides up. And we'll check the view's good for everybody. Okay, wonderful. So again, I'm Cassie. I use he, she, and they pronouns. I ask that folks use them all and switch them up. Never lady, please. I am white. I have curly brown hair, and I'm wearing some light cat eye glasses and a striped shirt. I am with PrideNet. We're a national organization and network of different individuals and organizations who are committed to the meaningful engagement of LGBTQI plus people throughout the entire research process with the goal of catalyzing LGBTQI plus health research. And what we mean by catalyzing is recognizing that there's a gap in knowledge and data about the health of LGBTQI plus people, which means there are fewer resources and less education about our health needs and care. One way we address that gap is through creating opportunities for community input to inform all stages of the research process. It's important for us to create those meaningful relationships with community and recognize the harm that has been caused and addressing how we can engage differently. That's why it's really important that we get input from our communities and we bring what we learn back to participants, to our communities, to researchers and providers. We also address this gap through connecting community members with ways to participate in research. You can kind of think of PrideNet as the umbrella, and underneath that is our community engagement, our researcher engagement, as well as 2 studies that we support. I'll tell you about briefly just so you have some context and understanding. The first study is called the PRIDE study. It's a national longitudinal study designed to better understand the health needs of LGBTQI plus people in the United States. The PRIDE study asks the big overarching question of how does being LGBTQI plus impact your physical, mental, and social health. Our second research project is through the National Institutes of Health. It's called the All of Us Research Program, which is a historic federal effort to gather data from 1 million or more people living in the United States to accelerate health research and improve health through creating the largest biomedical database. The All of Us Research Program is addressing that many groups of people have been left out of clinical and biomedical research. And this means we have less tailored healthcare, less information about the health experiences of communities who are underrepresented in biomedical research, which includes the LGBTQI plus community, as well as many more. It's really pushing forward this notion of precision medicine, which is like breaking out of a one-size-fits-all for medication and treatment. By studying data from diverse groups of people, researchers can learn more about what makes us sick and what keeps us healthy, and what researchers could learn could lead to better treatment and disease prevention for all of us. The links for both of these studies will be put in the chat, and you can also scan the QR codes if you like. So for today, we're going to talk specifically about our project that we did with Aurea in collaboration. So we're going to go over what we did and why, how we did that, a little bit about the session participants. We'll spend some time talking about the key themes, and in particular, a lot of the sub-themes that came up in that. And then we'll end by talking about our recommendations and our next steps. So a little bit of background. we recognize that addressing that gap that I talked about earlier means we also need to recognize that the LGBTQI plus community is not a monolith. We have different experiences, issues, concerns, strengths, and needs. And one method of community engagement that helps us understand these differences are community listening sessions, which are like akin to focus groups, where we listen to the opinions and experiences of LGBTQI plus people on health issues that are facing their communities, the possible solutions to those problems, the barriers to research participation, and their trusted sources of health information. So recognizing the need for more affirming research in healthcare related to aromantic communities, we reached out to Aurea to explore collaboration where we would design and implement community listening sessions that would help address the lack of information surrounding the social, mental, and physical health of aromantic people and help us understand the challenges faced by and the resilience of the aromantic community. We just really believe that if we take the time to listen to these unique experiences, we can create a more welcoming and affirming research environment for aromantic people.
Cassie,
Yes.
since the ASL interpreters are not showing up, could you not share your screen for the moment? Sorry
Yes.
about that. Thank you.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see the message. All right. So we're gonna get into what we did and how we did that. So we started partnering with Aurea in November of 2022 to develop the community listening sessions, which are again like our version of focus groups. We worked together in collaboration to determine the list of community listening session questions and the focus topics. We co-created the screening survey, a demographic survey, recruitment materials, and a post-session survey. And these materials were finalized and received IRB approval in May of 2023. If you do have the final report open, you can see the full list of questions we asked in Appendix A. Recruitment materials were distributed via social media and internal mailing lists between PrideNet and Aurea, and the sessions were held online. They were live and they occurred on May 25th, 2023 and June 5th, 2023. There were a total of 713 individuals who completed the screening and demographic surveys. And after a review of those screening survey responses, 24 individuals were deemed eligible to participate and invited to attend the scheduled sessions. We also did a post-session survey that was distributed to participants to collect both demographic and quantitative data. Both of the sessions were audio and video recorded, and the recordings were professionally transcribed and analyzed inductively for common themes. The report is then first shared back with participants and with our community partner, Aurea, and also with the All of Us research program that funded the project. And we share the report with them, and then we create actionable next steps where we work together to implement what we've learned. Additionally, we share the report with our PrideNet network, which includes our National Community Partner Consortium, our PrideNet Advisory Committee, our ambassadors, and our Research Advisory Committee. And we'll talk more about dissemination when we discuss the next steps at the end of the presentation. My next slide had some charts, but if you can pull up the report and you can look at Appendix B to see all the additional demographic information. There were a total of 21 participants who participated in both sessions, and 11 participants were in the first session on May 25th and 10 participants in the second session on June 5th. Okay, so I'm going to go into the key themes. We found 4 key themes which were related around the work that Aurea and us did together to sort of frame how we had the discussion questions. So the first theme is LGBTQI plus identity and intersectionality. The second theme was around community health concerns and solutions. The third theme was around health research attitudes and experiences. And the fourth theme was around information sharing and community building. I have, I had the slides to illustrate some quotes. So since I'm not showing those, I just want to highly encourage everyone to really read the full report because there's so many brilliant and beautiful quotes in the report. It was really difficult just trying to pick one illustrative quote per topic when putting the presentation together. So I really suggest folks check that out. And I'll spend some time summarizing each of the themes and then some of the sub-themes that came up. And I'll see if maybe we have time for me to read some of the quotes. So the first theme, LGBTQI plus identity and intersectionality. Within this theme, participants revealed challenges they face in explaining and navigating their aromantic identities, as well as explored how their aromantic identity intersects with other aspects of their lives, such as race, gender, and neurodivergence, highlighting the complex dynamics that shape their experiences within and outside the community. The discussions also delved into the relationship between aromanticism, gender identity exploration, and the impact of societal norms on romantic expectations. The first sub-theme that emerged within this is what we called in the report the A in LGBTQI plus identity. Most session participants identified as part of the LGBTQI plus identity because of their aromantic identity alone. And lots of other participants also identified because they had other LGBTQI plus identities, such as queer, two-spirit, or transgender. Session participants expressed a lot of frustration with people both within and outside of the LGBTQI plus community, not knowing what the A in LGBTQIA stands for, as well as the incorrect assumption that there's only one A and that aromanticism is an umbrella orientation under asexuality. And I'll just read one of the quotes. It said, this is from one of the participants, "I feel that queerness is something that lacks cis heteronormativity. And so I feel like aromanticism fits directly within it because saying no to the institutions of romance, something that's seen as inherently quote unquote human when we have humans who do not experience it. I don't know how else I could logically align myself," end quote. The second sub-theme that emerged was around session participants talking about their coming out experience and telling other people in their lives, or even just coming out to themselves as aromantic. A lot of session participants shared that coming out to people as aromantic or on the aromantic spectrum requires a lot more explanation and emotional labor because people have either never heard of aromanticism, they didn't believe that this identity was real, saying things like, quote, "you haven't met the right person," or "it's a phase," or just incorrect assumptions about aromanticism. And when explaining their aromantic identity to others, the language used by participants of the sessions was characterized by numerous intricacies. They described various micro-identities that encompassed really a spectrum of differences in romantic orientations. Some session participants felt their identity could not easily be explained to people outside of the community, and responses really ranged from 2 to 4 word phrases or 3 to 5 sentence descriptions. And I'll highlight one of the quotes, quote, "like I openly say that I'm aromantic. And then if somebody knows me at all, I'll say that I'm on the aromantic spectrum or gray spec, or that I'm aromantic / romantic." And then that comes with an immediate, I have to define what romantic / aromantic is. And then if we get a little bit deeper into community, there's a whole bunch of terms, end quote. So this leads nicely into our next sub-theme, which is on aromanticism on a spectrum. Session participants shared diverse identities and experiences encompassing not only their intersectional identities, but also within their aromantic identity. There was a range of behaviors and attitudes towards romance within the aromantic community. Some session participants were repulsed by romance, while others might love to watch romantic comedies or engage in behaviors that might be seen as romantic, such as cuddling, holding hands, sitting in someone's lap, but are not experienced as romantic by them. Regardless of individuals having diverse experiences and attitudes towards romance, there was a common thread. Session participants universally did not like when this information was used against them or to invalidate their identity. Continuing on the theme of intersectionality, session participants shared how their aromantic identity intersects with other identities. Examples included being neurodivergent, disabled, transgender, and Black. At the intersections of race, gender, and/or sexuality, session participants described the challenge of not feeling fully acknowledged or seen in spaces that centered one identity over another. And at the intersections of being neurodivergent and/or disabled, it was really vital to underscore that while some session participants shared that their neurodivergence or their medication for mental health diagnosis has made them feel like it was difficult to access what feelings are related to being aromantic and what feelings are related to their neurodivergence or medication, that this should not be understood as a causal relationship. Instead, it should be understood that both identities coexist and can create complexity for individuals trying to differentiate between them. Our last sub-theme under this main theme came up and emerged around conversations around norms and aromanticism. So a lot of session participants discussed how romantic norms are shaped by gendered social constructs and expectations. And session participants of really diverse gender identities shared that as they embraced their aromantic identity, they also embarked on a journey to explore their gender identity more. And then conversely, some session participants found that understanding their gender identity led to a better comprehension of their romantic identity. And for people that had fluid gender identities, their romantic and sexual orientations also fluctuated in alignment with their gender. Additionally, for session participants who identified as Black and/or neurodivergent, the journey of exploration took unique forms as they articulated encountering limitations in these explorative endeavors due to the norms around other intersection identities. And I'll read another quote here. It, referring to romance, is really lumped together with femininity. And it's something that especially women and AFAB, or assigned female at birth folks, are like half put on them to want. But also the stigmatization of aromantic spectrum men is something that is truly not talked about enough, because even though romance isn't exactly something that's put on men, the absence of it is definitely something that they have to deal with the sort of repercussions of because of how society views romance in general. Okay, so I'm gonna move into talking about our second theme, which was around community health concerns and solutions. A common thread that weaved through this theme was that a community health concern expressed by session participants centered on the general assumption that romance and romantic attraction are essential components of a person's life. As a result of this incongruence with the lived experience of aromantic people, session participants discussed the difficulties of growing up without an appropriate label for an important aspect of who they are and how they navigated both romantic and platonic relationships. Session participants shared that prior to learning about aromanticism and other micro-labels on the aromantic spectrum, they experienced negative mental health consequences and other trauma in their efforts to force romantic attraction or enter into relationships. So there were three sub-themes that emerged. The first one was around a lack of awareness and acceptance that aromanticism is a valid orientation. The general discussion about the idea that many people are unaware that aromanticism exists as an orientation, and beyond that, basic knowledge, like an understanding that there's not a problem, that it's not a problem to be fixed. And I'll highlight a quote here. I think as a start, one of the main things is for people to actually know what aromanticism is, because I feel like it's still a lot outside of the queer community. It's not well known or not known in the sense that we want to be known. as people kind of think of it as a problem or something to be fixed a lot of times, which can lead to, like, oh, you have to go to therapy and fix this issue because you don't experience romantic love, that sort of thing, end quote. The second sub-theme that emerged was around negative experiences in healthcare settings. Session participants expressed concerns about healthcare providers' attitudes that being aromantic is a problem that needs to be fixed, with one session participant likening this approach to conversion therapy, or experiencing providers drawing erroneous connections between health conditions and their aromantic orientation, leading to feelings that providers were denying their identity. And a lack of understanding of aromantic identities can contribute to unmet health needs for some individuals who feel that they just have to admit this information and they cannot be completely honest with their healthcare providers. And I have another quote here that says, "I'm aromantic and allosexual and often get mistaken for aromantic and asexual, even by health professionals, which sometimes mean they don't think of certain sexual health needs I might have," end quote. And then the third sub-theme that emerged under this theme of community health concerns was around partnering and amatonormativity. Session participants discussed like structural issues in social, legal, medical settings that assume that partnering is a normal part of adulthood and confer advantages to people who choose to partner and disadvantages to those who do not. A lot of session participants discussed economic advantages to partnering as it relates to shared housing and healthcare expenses. One session participant noted that having the freedom to choose who they could share their health insurance with would help in this regard. Additionally, there was discussions about the effects of societal changes and perceptions about how and whether people choose to pursue relationships that could benefit everyone, not just aromantic people. I'm going to move into our third theme, which is around health research, attitudes, and experiences. Overall, session participants felt that community participation in health research studies could help contribute to increased knowledge of aromantic orientations and related micro-labels and identities. The discussion really centered around the types of questions that could be asked to allow people to identify both their romantic and sexual orientation. So the first sub-theme was really about asking questions around sexual orientation and romantic attraction. Session participants expressed really a variety of opinions about this and about how researchers and clinicians should ask questions about sexual orientation and romantic attraction, although there was a consensus that those questions should be separated. Session participants felt that the context of how the questions were asked and how the information would be used were important factors in considering whether separate questions were needed. And one session participant noted that there is disagreement within the community about whether these questions should be asked separately, but expressed that having separate questions would allow them personally more options to identify who they are. The second sub-theme that emerged was around allowing for additional options and then multiple answers. So one session participant recommended allowing people to select multiple answers for gender identity, sexual orientation, and romantic/partnering orientation. Additional options that would allow for more non-stability to identify sexual and/or romantic attraction and partner orientations include allowing people to fill in the blank to select options that do not incorporate sexual attraction. And the third sub-theme in this theme was related to sharing results. So making sure that you're sharing results back with community. And one of the session participants said, maybe especially on social media, I can highlight a quote, "Having that active social media connection that you're forming relationships with these people that you're studying, you know their terms, you know their concerns, and that they can also benefit from your work as well," end quote. One session participant who's participated in several research studies in the past and is also a community leader lamented that the lack of sharing research results really impacts their ability to inform and help other community members. Another session participant suggested that building a presence on social media can also help researchers with relationship building and learning. So our fourth theme was around information sharing and community building. Within this theme, session participants discussed challenges of feeling welcome as aromantic people in LGBTQI plus spaces. They discussed their experiences building community online and provided solutions and ideas for how researchers and community centers could create more visibility for the aromantic community. And lastly, session participants shared about harmful terms, stereotypes, and assumptions people make about the aromantic community, both within and outside of the LGBTQI plus community. So we'll break that down a little bit more. There was a sub-theme around exclusion from LGBTQI plus community. Most session participants felt that LGBTQI plus spaces, communities, and events should be inclusive for everyone under the LGBTQI plus umbrella, but often experience them as exclusionary to aromantic people. And this sentiment was accentuated for session participants who also identified as disabled, neurodivergent, transgender, two-spirit, and/or Black. And I can highlight a quote from this section. Quote, "I felt fully welcomed as a trans guy in the community that I found, but there was never any discussion of anything to do with aromanticism. And I think that's part of why it took me so long to come to this label. And I wish that more community spaces were willing to have that discussion, just because I feel like all of the parts of me, that was the part that never came up that I wished had," end quote. The second theme that arose under community building and information sharing was around online community. Many session participants said they found community with other aromantic people online through Tumblr, Discord, Instagram, and X, formerly Twitter. Others preferred to stay off social media, feeling too much like their identities were up for debate or at the center of some sort of discourse, while others described having to sort through a lot of aphobia until they did find an accepting community. And a quote I can highlight here from a session participant said, "I know I've talked to similar people online who are also asexual and aromantic, who like had the realization like, oh my God, there are other people like me." And then in the same breath going, "Oh my God, I'm not broken," end quote. The next something that came up was around visibility, and it was really important to session participants. They named the aromantic flag as a great way to let aromantic people know that you want to include them. And despite the abundance of aromantic micro-identities, there was a general consensus among session participants that the terms aromantic, aro, or arospec were good options for creating an inclusive and welcoming environment for individuals in the aromantic community. Session participants explained the complexity of being seen as aromantic through images used in recruitment materials like flyers, posters, and pamphlets, and a lot more details of that can also be found in the report. Session participants expressed a personal connection to the traditional pride flag or the progress flag upon seeing it, but this didn't imply that they felt they would be accepted or feel like they belonged by others in a space where the pride flags are displayed. And only when accompanied by the aromantic flag did some session participants even feel comfortable enough to enter into spaces or attend pride-related events. And the last sub-theme under this was around harmful terms, stereotypes, and assumptions. Session participants discussed experiences of harm and discrimination, both within and outside of the LGBTQI plus community, resulting from misunderstandings about aromanticism. And while there were some specific terms that session participants identified as harmful, many session participants shared that it was less about specific terms and more about concepts that reinforced harmful stereotypes. Examples of those included being infantilized, invalidated, and dehumanized. Additionally, many session participants conveyed that they often find themselves trapped in a really harmful dichotomy. This occurs either due to a lack of comprehension about aromanticism, leading to the misinterpretation of their actions, or the imposition of rigid societal expectations, which can have their identities called into question, or they felt the pressure to conform. Session participants gave various examples that demonstrated how certain terms carry distinct impacts when used by someone within the aromantic community compared to someone outside of the aromantic community. And a lot of really detailed examples can also be found in the report. And I can highlight a quote. I guess the kind of things that I've noticed is that there's a big problem with being infantilized sometimes, with general society seeing romantic relationships as a sign of adulthood. So you kind of get looked at as a kid, even though you may be partnering, it's still not the correct way, end quote. So I have those wrapping up the themes, I can move into the recommendations that PrideNet has, and then a little bit about what we're going to be doing next, which also includes an invitation. So our full list of recommendations and what PrideNets are going to be doing next is in the report, but I'll highlight some of those things here. So our first recommendation is to ensure that aromantic people feel welcomed into your space. It's helpful to affirm this community as part of the larger LGBTQI+ community. Display the aromantic flag and provide aromantic resources at clinics or in community spaces. And our partner Aurea has pamphlets available on their website. They're free to download and print, and they're really great. Our second recommendation really builds on that, because you don't just want to slap a flag on something and people are going to know that they can be understood and really cared for. So health researchers and healthcare providers need to be educating themselves about aromanticism and the aromantic community to build trust and reduce the amount of emotional labor that some people experience in medical and healthcare settings. Our third recommendation is do not conflate asexual orientation with aromantic orientation. In the care environment, this does not mean that you should always address them separately, since some people split their sexual and romantic attractions while others do not. People should be given the option to address them separately or together. Our fourth recommendation is to acknowledge the diversity and individual attitudes towards romantic attraction and partnership within the aromantic community, with an increased awareness of the disparities that some individuals face associated with romantic attraction and or partnering. Some aromantic people are in partner relationships while others are not, which can have economic, medical, and legal implications. Our fifth recommendation is to allow aromantic people to be seen as whole and complex and not as having an issue that needs to be fixed. Do not pathologize aromanticism. Understand that there are layered identities and experiences of aromantic people may at times be related, but they do not have a causality relationship. Aromanticism is not caused by medication, a traumatic event, mental health diagnosis, or being neurodiverse. Our sixth recommendation is to ensure better representation of the aromantic community in health research. Include aromantic community members from the beginning, so in your study design, and engage them throughout, including the sharing of results. Familiarize yourself with the terms used and discourse that's happening within the community. Our seventh recommendation is to consider asking clinical and research questions in a way that separates sexual orientation and romantic orientation and allows for multiple selections, as well as the opportunity for individuals to provide write-in responses. And our last recommendation is around using language that is inclusive of the aromantic community and informed by differences in attitudes towards romantic attraction, love, and partnering. So, what is PrideNet going to be doing next with all this information? I'd love to just share some things about that. So we're going to keep expanding our community engagement network by building relationships and partnerships with organizations serving and or advocating for the aromantic community. We're going to continue to recruit people who identify as aromantic to serve on our participant advisory committee and our PrideNet ambassadors. This helps us enhance our ability to refine our messaging, our outreach, and research dissemination activities in real time. We're going to advise as appropriate to treat sexual orientation and romantic attraction as separate questions in its partnering research studies, and we're going to collaborate with members of the aromantic community to review the options provided for those questions and ensure they're inclusive. We want to continue to develop aromantic inclusive programming and use more aromantic inclusive language and visuals in our materials. We want to continue to engage with people who identify as aromantic throughout the entire research process. And we want to use community feedback to ensure that the research participation experience is affirming and meaningful and meets the community's priorities. We do want to continue to share the research findings back with the community, including disseminating this report. We also will be using the results of the community listening sessions to educate health researchers, healthcare providers, and all of the other organizations within the All of Us Consortium on the lived experiences of aromantic community members to increase their cultural competency, humility, and sensitivity to the unique issues that the aromantic community has faced in medical and health research settings. Our next step is an invitation. So in the beginning, I shared a bit about the PRIDE study, which is a national and longitudinal study that focuses specifically on the social, mental, and physical health of LGBTQI+ people. And unlike traditional studies that might ask one research question to one group of people, the PRIDE study is developing a diverse data set of health information. So we really want to welcome the opportunity to facilitate high quality, community engaged research collaborations that aim to improve the health and well-being of aromantic communities. So we have an ancillary study process where you can use our existing data, or you can ask your own question to do a novel study. And there's an opportunity here to build on these community listening sessions. You can work closely with a PRIDE team liaison to help achieve those goals. There should be a link for more information about this process and who to reach out to in the chat. And I would definitely be remiss if I just didn't say a ginormous thank you to all of the participants of these community listening sessions who continue to teach me and inspire me. It was such a amazing experience. And also to Aurea. We could not have done this without Aurea or the participants of the session. So thank you so much. And I think someone should also be putting potentially my contact information in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cassie. It was really great. We didn't get to see your presentation, but still, thank you for working with us.
Of course.
Very exciting to go through everything again. And yes, we have shared the links in the chat, and we can definitely share your contact information as well. Let's see if we've had any questions. There was a general question in the chats that came in about Aurea. Is Aurea working on becoming a 501c3 to accept deductible donations? We are working towards becoming a 501c3 and being able to do tax deductible donations is part of that. And we're working currently to select consultants to work with this year. So keep an eye on that. Let's see if there's any specific questions for Cassie and the PrideNet study. Oh, people have found it very informative.
I'm sending my contact information in the chat in Zoom to be put in the chat on YouTube in case anyone wants to reach out to me directly. If you think of questions later, I'll also be here through the whole event and happy to stay at the end for Q&A.
Yeah, perfect. Well, it seems at the moment we don't have any questions, so we can go on towards a break then. All right, well, thank you so much again, Cassie. Great job. Very
Thank you.
excited to have been able to work with you on this project.
Me too. I'm excited for what's going to keep coming from it. Just the
Yes,
beginning.
absolutely. All right, so then we will head into break. All right, welcome back from the break. We'll be now moving on to the next presentation on the aromatic census by Nimat, our census coordinator. The team and volunteers have worked very hard on this, and we're so pleased to share the first results. And I will be sharing the presentation in a moment, just waiting for one of our teammates to get screen sharing ready.
I guess can I start, Anya?
Yes, Nimat, you should be able to get into it now.
Sounds good. And this is Nimet. My pronouns are he, him, they, them, am, and I'm functioning as the census coordinator for Aurea, and we're going to do a brief presentation on this latest version of the aromatic census. I guess we can go to the next slide.
Yes, one moment. I do need to fix the
Sure.
screen sharing. All right, unfortunately, the screen sharing isn't working as we're hoping. So when it comes to the graphs, I will take a moment. I will briefly share my screen when the graphs come up, but otherwise we'll have to unfortunately be without the presentation.
Sounds good. I think we can manage till the graphs, so I think it should still work. So I guess we'll kind of start with a brief introduction, right, on what the purpose of the census was and the context. So the Aero census started in about 2020, and the 2023 Aero census is the second iteration of it. We intend to have this take place every 2 to 3 years approximately, and the main objective is to gather information on both the composition and the needs of the aromatic community at large. In terms of the methods, it's a community survey, which means we kind of recruit from through our online social media from the community around us. The survey was open to all aromantics, and in fact, some folks who were not aromantic but were connected with and knew about the survey could fill out the survey as well, at least parts of it. So it was a convenience online sample in terms of recruitment from the community around us, and also through snowball sampling, which means that participants could kind of pass on the survey to people they knew and so forth, and it would just kind of snowball that way. We recruited through Aurea's website and our social media platforms. In terms of the sections, the original survey had about, I think about 7 sections plus the intro part. We expanded to about 40 fun sections this time and covered both demographics, orientation, experiences of racism, intersectionality. There were new sections also on trauma, COVID-19, and various aromatic experiences. The survey was multiple choice. People could often select a variety of options in each question, and there were also a lot of write-in options and use skip logic for some of the sections. The analysis plan, part of it will be coding manually for the written-in responses, and there will be basic descriptive analysis with cross tabulations. In terms of the process, we did some things differently compared to the first census in 2020. So we recruited through our website, through online means, much larger teams. So the final census team was probably around 100 plus. And we had a variety of roles, including question editors, question testers, analysts, and translators. After team discussion, we actually worked on offering different versions on other languages apart from English. So there were a total of 12 language versions, including the English one. And basically for the different sections, there was also we kind of took into account feedback from the prior census, and then also kind of discussed amongst ourselves in terms of how to kind of add sections. We actually had 6 teams of question editors who kind of worked with about 2 to 3 question sets, which had different themes. And there was also a lot of comment from both the translators and analysts, very engaged team. And we identified throughout the process of creating this census some opportunities for future versions, right? One was in terms of the race ethnicity questions, which although were expanded, a lot of us felt did not necessarily capture the complete diversity. And that's always a hard construct to measure. Researchers in general have difficulty and use different, I guess, ways of both either using US Census data, like the US Census framework, which is often considered inadequate, or other frameworks are not even measuring at all. Some of the debates were around comprehensiveness of the census, which this was a pretty large number of questions versus feasibility for the future, and also the applicability of some of the concepts and questions across languages and cultures. In terms of the next steps, during this year, we plan to proceed to the analysis phase, and also later writing up the report and then disseminate the results. In terms of our initial findings, the total number of participants was 4,619, and these were folks who kind of filled out different versions. The larger group of folks filled out the English version, which had about 4,045 respondents, but pretty much every version, some people kind of filled them out as well. Catalan, we had 18 folks fill out, Dutch 65, German 222, Greek 6, Hebrew 11, Norwegian 10, Polish 38, Russian 30, Spanish 133, Italian 38, and Bahasa Indonesia 3. They also have some a little bit of like raw, unclean results from the English version we could show now. And I think, Anyang, you can pull up some of the, I guess, pictures, hopefully, some of the graphs.
Absolutely. I can share screen that.
Thank you. So this first graph represents the first question. So it's whether the respondent considers themselves aromantic or in the aromantic spectrum. As we can see, a variety of responses here, right? The majority of folks filled out yes, always, 62.5%. But as you can see, there was some variety with a decent percentage filling out as questioning, and there was a sliver who didn't consider themselves aromantic or that they did previously. I guess we can go to the next one.
All right.
Thank you.
I will just show the graph for a moment so people can take a look at it, and
Yep.
then I'll remove it so that we can show the interpreters. All right.
And this one here is on aro identity and orientations, right? So there are two questions. One asked whether the respondents' arospec identity affected their sexual orientation in any way. And as we can see, about almost a quarter answered yes. A fairly large amount, nearly 40%, answered unsure, and almost 40% also answered no. In terms of whether question 16b, whether the respondents' arospec identity affected their gender identity in any way, we had about 15% answer yes, 55% answered no, and 30% answered unsure. I guess we'll wait a bit before going to the next graph. And the next one is demographics, is it? Yep. So this one, as we can see, in terms of race and ethnicity, the majority of respondents, 88.2%, identified as white, 11.9% responded as Asian, 5.1% were Black or African American, 2.2% Native American, and 1.7% other. And then there were several questions asking about experiences of being aromantic and also belonging to an ethnic or racial minority. And this was one of the questions which asked for respondents to answer if they felt worried or anxious about being an aromantic BIPOC and or an aro who belongs to other ethnic racial minorities. As we can see, there's kind of a fairly even split with about close to a little bit over 50% answering 0 or 1 should be kind of low, and then the rest, which is a little bit under 50%, answering 2 to 3, 4, which would be kind of higher on being concerned about this intersectionality. In terms of the being disabled or having neurodivergence, 55.3% of the respondents to this in these questions answered as being mentally ill. 61.3% answered as being neurodivergent, 6.9% as cognitively or intellectually disabled, and 15.8% as physically disabled. So we got like a fair amount of answers or experience of intersectionality. I think we can go to the next slide, which is the first one on aromantic experiences. Thanks. Sure. If you can see question 111, which asked if the respondent was out as aromantic, with almost 4,000 responses, about 15.4% answered as being out to all or most people. 45.7% answered as being partially out to some people. 30.3% answered as being partially out, but only to one person or few select people, and 8.6% answered no as being not out to anyone. This other question, which was 118, which was again almost 4,000 respondents, asked if the respondent currently interacted with other aromantics, and 29.2% answered as yes, interacting both online and offline. 45.5% answered as yes, interacting only online. 6% answered as yes, but only interacting offline. And close to 20% answered as no, not interacting with other aromantics at all. And I think we can go to the next slide, which is also aromantic experiences. Thanks. And then this slide has the question 93A was from one of our news sections, which was on the COVID-19 pandemic. So about a little bit over 3,700 responses to this one. And the question was asking if the respondent changed their AeroSpec label during the COVID-19 pandemic. So 46.6% said they started using the AeroSpec label during the pandemic. 42.9% said they were already using one before the pandemic, and about 10.4% answered that they still had doubts about their label. For question 32, which was asking if the respondent had ever been attracted to someone romantically, and a little bit over 4,000 responses to this one, 23.5% answered as yes. 43.3%, which was the largest answer, answered as no, and a bit over a third, well, around a third answered as unsure. So these are just some initial, I guess, just like a sampling of some of our raw results, but there's definitely like a lot of topics we asked about. So we're very excited to in the near future, hopefully start working on the analysis and the report itself afterwards. So in terms of upcoming news, we continue calling for volunteers. So we're definitely looking for another census co-coordinator to help us with the next phases. So if anyone has interest, both from the Aero Census team or elsewhere, please let us know. We're also always looking for more analysts, as well as writers and translators. Translators, because we'll need help as we do the analysis with some of the other language versions for sure. In terms of acknowledgements, we definitely wanted to give a huge thank you to the participants who responded to the census, as well as the ORIA team, and in particular, our amazing census team volunteers who really devote a lot of time and effort to helping us with the census. Really huge team effort from everyone. So very thankful to this amazing team who came together. Also want to extend thanks to the ACE community survey team who helped us both with recruitment for our census team, and also gave us some guidance from their experience, as well as the Aero and ACE communities at large. So huge thank you. And if anyone wants to look up information on the Aero Census, you can find it at aromanticism.org/aerocensus. And just wanted to wish everyone a happy Aromantic Spectrum Awareness Week. Thank you. And I think we're going to the questions now. Is that right, Anyang?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for the presentation.
Of course.
Yeah, we did receive a question earlier through one of our submission forms.
Yep, and I guess I can kind of pose a question and also go on to the answer, right?
Yeah.
So the thanks, Anya. And the question was on how do aromantic folk find meaningful connection in the context of amatonormativity? And we would say that meaningful connections can definitely vary from person to person, but certainly amateur normativity can really make it a challenge to find meaningful connections, especially taking into account that many non-romantic relationships are deprioritized, right? Some suggestions we have is joining a group based on shared interests, such as hobbies. Volunteering as well can provide opportunities for meaningful connection. Also engaging in community care, which goes against the romantic couple-centric standard. And for many eros, engaging with other eros can also lead to meaningful connections and just a shared understanding of the barriers related to amatonormativity. And then we'll post some links to some of the resources we have on our website if folks want to look up more information or um, get a little more help from some of the suggestions from some of the resources we post. So thanks.
Yeah, and thank you. Yeah, and this is also relevant. We had another question that was also about amatonormativity that was submitted by Aiden, who asked what are simple or small ways aromantics can fight amatonormativity in daily lives, especially without outing ourselves. So the resources that we posted in the chat can also help that. So we have, for example, a workbook on challenging amatonormativity, as well as a newsfeed article that focuses a little bit more on self-care and community care as well. We did also get a question in the chat. Are the results you presented just from the English version, or have all the languages been analyzed?
Yep, no, that's an excellent question. And I apologize because I think I did not make that clear. The results we presented were just kind of raw results from the English version. So we still have to analyze both the English version in full detail, but also the other versions. So thanks. And we'll definitely be counting on the help of any of our existing translators, but hopefully other folks who join to kind of help us with that part. So thank you.
Yeah, there's definitely a big task ahead for us
Yep.
in analyzing all of the results, but it will get done. And I'm very excited to see also if there are differences across languages and what other exciting things come out of the census.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we're all very excited about the upcoming analysis and results.
Let's see if there's any more questions in the chat. Anybody else have anything else they want to know about the census? Well, it seems that at the moment there aren't any other questions, but feel free to post things in the chat. So if you come up with a question later, we can always get back to it at a later point. But thank you again, Nimat, and also to all of our census team volunteers and all of the participants who took the time to fill in the census to make this all possible. We're a bit early, but we'll go ahead and go on to our break. And after that, then I'll be passing facilitation on to another team member. So we'll be back in a bit.
Alrighty, we all good? Lovely. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Aurea live stream fundraiser for Aromantic Spectrum Awareness Week 2024. For those of you who are just joining us and don't know who we are, Aurea is a volunteer-run online organization that connects aromantics worldwide, provides resources about aromanticism, collaborates with researchers to expand our understanding of aromanticism, and and advocates for aromantic inclusion in diverse conversations. I am Leah. My pronouns are she, her, and er, and I am Aurea's organizational outreach manager and conference planner. As this is a fundraiser live stream, if you want to support the work we do, then please consider donating using the link in the live stream description. We aim to raise $600 to fund our web hosting and organizational expenses for this year. And so far, we have raised $593.73, which is so close to our goal. And we want to extend a massive thank you to everyone who has donated so far. If you're curious about how your donation will be used by us, our financial reports are available on our website through the link in the description as well. We want to, again, let you know that this live stream is accessible for deaf and hard of hearing people. We are joined by Juniper Cassaway and Jay Raby, our American Sign Language interpreters, and you should see them spotlighted throughout this event. And thank you again to Pro Bono ASL for providing access. And thank you, huge thank you, to PrideNet for helping us fund this accessibility. And captions should also be available. Moving on to the next round of presentations, we have the wonderful people from ERO-UQ who will be sharing their findings from their 2022 survey. We will be showing you their presentations, hopefully. Do apologize for the technical errors that have been happening throughout this live stream. If you want to help us with future live streams, please consider volunteering. We would really appreciate your help. But we are going to show all of their presentations in one go and then bring everyone back to answer questions. So please feel free to post your questions in the chat during the presentations and they will all be addressed at the end. First up is James, who will be talking to us about how aromantics define aromanticism, the stigma aromantics experience, and the joy of aromantic connection. Over to you, James.
Just a moment as we set up for the video.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are in the world. My name is James Fowler. I'm from the University of Queensland, and I'm really excited to share with you an update on where we are with the ERO-UQ survey today. Again, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands on which we are meeting today. So for me here in Australia, I'm on the lands of the Yagara and Turrbal people, and I pay my respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country, and we recognise their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. And I'd like to extend that today to any First Nations people from around the world who might be joining us live for this presentation. So firstly, let me introduce you to the wonderful team who are responsible for the Arrow UQ survey. So Lisa Borton is me, I'm James, and I'm from the University of Queensland, as I said at the very beginning. I work with incredible people at the University of Queensland, so Judith Dean and Marini Mendes, who have really been instrumental in building this survey and getting our data analysed. And we also have two incredible investigators from Aurea, so Alex Crook and Anyang Chavez Baldini, who both provide incredible, lived experience, but also a fantastic community perspective on our data. And we're very proud to work with those two incredible people as our community partners. Along the way as well, we've also had the chance to work with two incredible students, Tabitha Backer and John Louis Dillon, and you'll have the chance to hear from them a little bit later about the work that they've been doing with the Arrow survey. So I want to talk a little bit about our journey with Aurea and how we came to a point where we worked together to build a survey and now, publishing research outcomes. So it all started for us in 2019. I did an interview with the incredible Alex Crook, who at the time I believe was the Aurea secretary, for our Open Doors Youth Services Humans of Our Community interview initiative. So Open Doors Youth Services is a queer youth support organisation in Brisbane, Australia. And Alex had the chance to present on what it means to be aromantic, and we did a wonderful interview together about that story. That then transitioned into a collaboration with an organisation I worked for called Queerest Minds for Aromantic Spectrum Awareness Week in 2021. That involved interviews with 5 aromantic people, creating infographics, and developing a video called Aromanticism Explored, which you can see on your right here. It's still available to watch if you're interested. And then in 2021 as well, we had the conversations around the need for more research in this area. I'd started working in a research role at the time, and then that's when Alex and I put our heads together and said, well, let's build something together. As well, in 2021, it was a big year for our partnerships. I started working with the Born This Way Foundation, and I did a wonderful interview with Alex about what it means to be aromantic and Aurea itself, which you can find on their Channel Kindness platform too. Then in 2022, we launched the Arrow survey, and we spent the last 2 years analysing the data and really diving into it, essentially. And in 2024, we'll talk more about this at the end of the presentation, we're looking to do a second round of surveys with aromantic communities to continue to build on the work we've done so far. So to explain a little bit more about what we did with the Arrow UQ survey, perhaps some of you completed it 2 years ago. It was a large survey. It was very big, I will acknowledge that. And we wanted to explore a whole range of different topics. We worked out that there should be 5 key areas. The first one being define, so understanding what is aromanticism. Shine, what joy does aromanticism bring people in their lives? And we thought this was really important to include, but because there wasn't very much in the way of empirical evidence at the time, it would have been very easy to take a very strong deficits approach, which we do unintentionally in lots of queer research. So it was really important for us to really emphasize this in our data as well. Discrimination, so understanding the discrimination that people experience, the barriers, particularly around normativity that Arrow people experience in their lives, and where next, so understanding what should we do next in our research. The survey had open and closed questions, and the reason we had that is because some things we needed kind of a clearer yes or no, and other things we really wanted to capture some depth and insight into what it means to be aromantic for people, and to really have context of the experiences. Now, we launched this internationally in January of 2022, and you can see on your right here, there is a nice, well, this was the promo poster we had and Aurea sharing it. We expected 500 responses over 6 months. That's what we planned for, but we had 2,000 responses in 48 hours, which was fantastic and phenomenal. Slightly overwhelming, and we did have to cut the survey after 2 days because it was a qualitative survey and we read every single line of information that came through, and we felt like 2,000 was definitely enough to do what we needed to do, but also there was a sense of how big could this actually get. So fantastic community pour out of interest in this survey. So I wanted to give you an overview of where we're at with all of our strands of data coming from the total survey of 2,000 people, and you'll get to hear in a lot more detail about all these different strands today. Paper 1, which is what I've been responsible for, exploring definitions, stigma, and the joy of connection, which had about 1,600 responses. Paper 2, which is looking at the experiences of intra-community violence and discrimination, which had about 1,200 responses. And then paper 3, experiences of disclosing identity to healthcare providers, which had about 250 responses. Obviously, there's a big number difference in the number of people sharing their experiences in these papers. The reason paper 3 has so few is because not many people had actually ever disclosed their identity to a healthcare provider. And Tabitha will talk more about all of that in her presentation later on today. Paper 1 is published in 2024 in the International Journal of Sexual Health. At the time of recording this, we don't yet have a link to share with you all, but I'm sure by the time I'm sitting here anxiously watching you all watch my presentation, I'll have a link that I can share with you all. And then the next 2 papers will be submitted for publication by the end of this year, which is really exciting. So what I want to dive into now then with you is my bit of work exploring aromanticism through an online qualitative investigation with the aromantic community, freeing, alienating, and utterly fantastic. So if you'd like a copy of this, you're more than welcome to email me. We were very lucky to have a free open access agreement with this journal, which basically means that anyone can read it for free around the world. So hopefully by the time of watching this, you'll have had a chance to find this paper online. So in this research, what we wanted to do was to understand how aromantic people define aromanticism, the stigma experienced, and the impact of connecting with an aromantic identity. So we analysed responses to 3 questions from the ARA-UQ survey, exploring how do you define aromanticism, what are the biggest misconceptions, and what is the impact of connecting with an aromantic identity, and a huge sample size of 1,600 participants. The data was analysed using a process of reflexive thematic analysis, and what this means is that there is the process of reading and rereading and rereading to understand the best way the data fit and the stories being told in that data. But there was also a reflection on who I am as a person, who our team is as people, and the ways that our insider and outsider perspectives influence the data. And we think that the thematic analysis and the thematic structure we found is a really exciting and really balanced way of presenting the data we found. Participants, and this is kind of the same for the entire ARA-UQ dataset, were predominantly from the United States of America and aged between 16 to 25. So in our first theme, we've kind of described, which many people in the community are vastly aware of, is that being aromantic is a spectrum of experiences, but what the fuck is love? So we saw a range of experiences described, talking about not wanting relationships, disgust, confusion, and as you will all know, this is very similar to what communities share through their lived experiences. I'm sure no one is shocked to read this in this presentation. The other thing that came up for us in this theme is the idea of what is romantic love? And that came through in participants' words with the idea of what makes a behavior romantically coded. It was confusing to some people why giving flowers, holding hands, kissing is inherently romantic. And also, it's really hard sometimes to describe what it means to be aromantic because you're describing the absence of something that you've never experienced. So how do you describe the opposite of something that you just don't know? And we think that provided some really interesting insight into the ways that we think about romantically coded behavior, but also broadly, like, what is romantic love? And when we looked at literature, it's very poorly defined to begin with. As well, our participants really described that aromanticism should be considered as distinct from asexuality. Participants are described, such as this person on the right here, that their identities are intrinsically intertwined because they are aro-ace, but they should be respected as their own separate identities. And in research, we haven't done a very good job of doing that so far. So we think that's something really important to communicate, that from our sample, the aromanticism and asexuality might be connected with some people, but they are distinct.
Just having to pause for a minute as we fix some technical issues.
Our second theme is called Amatonormativity is Bullshit, and it really just describes a range of stigma experienced by participants. There was a sense that aro people are treated as less than human, that aro people are incapable of love and therefore horrible people, that aro people are traumatized and need healing. And we got the sense that all of this came from an amatonormative expectation around romantic love being the most important thing that you should have. And as this person describes, it would be as if it would be better to be dead than be single and an aromantic adult. In our third theme, we talk about the power of connecting with an aromantic identity. Many people described it as being a turning point in their lives, where they now did things differently, that are unlikely to make the same mistakes. It helped people accept themselves for who they are. They kind of, as this person describes, it was like a sigh of relief when they could learn that they didn't have to do things the way they had been doing things. Other people have described it as being a breath of air whilst you were suffocating. It was a really important moment in self-acceptance for many people. And as well, connecting with an aromantic identity gave people the resources, the language, the knowledge to push back against societal expectations and live the life that they actually wanted to be living. So really what this data tells us is that connecting with an aro identity for the people who relate to that is life-changing. And there's a real opportunity to take control of your life. So I've kind of gone through this research very quickly because we've got quite a bit in my chunk of this presentation today, but I really hope you were able to read the paper and really see the depth of experiences that were described by our incredible participants. I think some concluding comments based on this bit of research is that often in this research paper, there is a sense that we are identifying what the community already knows. Now, the aromantic spectrum is a spectrum of experiences. We think that education is needed to help people learn about aromanticism. That's both through awareness to help reduce stigma around what it means to be aromantic, but also help people connect with the identity who might really benefit but have never heard of it before. And we think that this information we have really identifies the need for more tailored and safe supports to better meet the needs of aromantic people in a variety of care and support contexts. So where I want to end my bit of the presentation is talking about future research. So as I said, in the ARO-UQ survey, we asked people what areas of research are really important to you. It has, however, been about 2 years since we collected this data. And so what we've done is we've taken some of the most common responses by participants there, and we've made a new survey. And what we want people to do in this survey is just to rank which areas they think are really important for them and for aromantic communities. Within the survey, we hope to explore all these topics in future research, but we really want to get a gauge here about what is important and meaningful to aromantic communities in 2024. So I invite you after this presentation over the next couple of weeks to follow this QR code or follow the URL and complete the survey and help us do incredible research alongside aromantic communities. And really making sure that aro voices are heard and integrated in any research that is done with this community. So thank you very much for watching my portion of the presentation. I hope this data does aromantic communities justice, and I look forward to watching the following presentations by the incredible John and Tabitha. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, James. That was a great presentation. Apologies again for all of the technical issues. We are trying to find ways around it, though none of us are very proficient in Zoom. But thank you for your patience with us while we figure this all out. Next for our presentation is Tabitha, who will be exploring the experiences of aromantic people who have disclosed their identities with healthcare providers. Over to you.
Sorry, everybody. I'm just trying to figure out how I could share this and be on the video. All right. Is that okay? I can't see the comments. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start. Young, let me know if for some reason you need me to do something else. So hi everybody, my name is Tabitha. I am working with the wonderful James and Judith. Very excited. I'm a fourth year medical student at the University of Queensland. And I looked into how aromantic folks experience disclosing their identity to healthcare providers and how kind of that impacts their healthcare experiences. So I too would just like to acknowledge and pay respects to the ancestors and traditional owners of the lands around the world and wherever people might be in this live stream and value and recognize their valuable contributions. So a little bit of background, as I'm sure now we all know, and from the amazing presentation that PrideNet had, you know, queer people tend to have worse experiences in healthcare settings generally, from previous research and continuous research that we see. There seems to be a disconnect between providers and patients, whether it's because of lack of understanding or poor communication, and just a barrier that creates there's a lot of stigma as well as discrimination. And I think that is compounded by provider knowledge as well. Okay. This, more importantly, this results in vast health inequities and poorer health outcomes, which is obviously something that we are deeply passionate about, especially that it's having real life impact in their health. There is currently no data on aromantic folks' experience in healthcare. As I was writing this, I was not aware of the amazing PrideNet survey and community engagement. And so we wanted to explore the unique barriers and experiences of aromantic people. As we know, we don't have research, but there is research saying that unmarried individuals have poorer health outcomes in healthcare and poorer experiences. And so the aim of this research was to explore how disclosing the aromantic identity to healthcare providers affected their experiences. So I just want to make sure. Okay, sorry, I think I need to stop sharing my screen. Apologies. Anyang, should I just go ahead and, okay, I'll just continue with a presentation. Okay, great. Okay, sorry. So the purpose of this research was to explore the unique experiences of aromantic folk disclosing their identity in an aim to see the potential barriers and facilitators, and most importantly, to inform future healthcare provision. So we looked at 2 questions that were analyzed from the ARO-UQ survey. The first question was whether they had disclosed their identity to a healthcare provider. And the second one was, if so, how was that experience? The first thing that we did was try to find the themes that had developed in the data. And so we actually were almost at the end of the paper, and then we realized that we kind of wanted to, without taking away the voices of the respondents, we wanted to really make sure that we were quantifying, the experience, whether they were good, bad, or neutral. And so we went back into it and we looked into whether the experience was good, and that was defined by an experience where the respondent felt validated, supported, and it was generally positive. If it was bad, it was non-validating. Respondents were dismissed or often pathologized. And neutral was defined as fine, or if they had lack of details, or the staff was unresponsive. And then from there, we subcategorized the themes into provider reaction, so the initial reaction of when the respondents disclosed their identity, and then how they were treated after that. So the good experiences, we found that they were quite evenly split between good and bad, with good being 44% of those that responded, and then bad being 41, almost 42%, and then having 15% that were neutral. A caveat to this was that some experiences, they had 2 different experiences within the same response. So some were categorized as good and bad. So for theme 1, we covered how a healthcare provider could provide a positive or accepting initial reaction. One quote that really stuck out was, she, the healthcare provider, asked what that meant, but luckily she was accepting, and that made me feel validated. And so although providers were often uninformed, that didn't necessarily mean that the patients had a bad experience, as long as they were non-judgmental. So they wanted to feel accepted, and they didn't want to have their identity any further questioned. A step above that was when providers were eager to learn. They went well, and some respondents were excited to teach the provider so that the future patients could benefit from that. And especially when providers were accepting and engaged, it created a positive experience for the respondents. For theme 2, this was when providers weren't super accepting of their experiences. So the main theme was, they doubted the existence of ARO and ACE identities and said that one day, quote, I'd find the one. And so respondents felt ignored, invalidated, and betrayed. One provider made a weird expression and didn't believe the respondent. Another one was condescending and said that they were too young and confused, even though they were 18. And some made them feel unsafe as they had, some mental health issues and they felt like they couldn't access their healthcare provider from fear of coming out and finding something was quote unquote wrong with them. For theme 3, it was the way that providers, again, treated patients once that they were disclosed. So this was composed of like validation, active listening, and normalization. Therapists validated the experience of those that came out and didn't want them to fit a definition of normal, but rather be happy with their identity. And so they felt validated and were really grateful for that. Active listening was really important, especially in a therapy session, said they were very accepting and receptive to their identity and were always listening intently whenever they needed to talk about their identity. And another key factor was normalization. So one patient had a gender specialist who said it was very understanding and accepted and felt very normal as part of their treatment. And finally, theme 4 was when the treatment plan didn't go as well and they tried to fix patients' aromanticisms or respondents' aromanticisms, sorry. And one key thing that we found was that many people that disclosed their identities, treatment plans that had a negative experience was because they were pathologized. So it was clear that they hadn't heard of the identities, but rather than being inquisitive, they were judgmental and attributed it to trauma or sexual assault, or said that they needed therapy. There were several people that had to go through conversion therapy after coming out as aromantic. And so this was frustrating for them and obviously created a negative experience or a bad experience within a healthcare setting. And so why is this research important? We were wanting to explore what aromantic experiences were disclosing in healthcare settings. And we found that there was an even distribution between bad and good experiences. And the key to having a good experience were, open-mindedness, listening, acceptance, and providing a safe and supportive environment, even if they weren't super knowledgeable, as long as they were good communicator and were listening, generally individuals were happy to teach. And for bad experiences, we found that lack of knowledge, stigma, and pathologization of aromanticism makes patients feel invalidated and dismissed and could potentially create a barrier to future access in healthcare. And so why is this important? We want to make sure, if historically queer people have been discriminated against in healthcare settings, and whilst aromantic people are part of the LGBTQIA community, they are a unique subset of group that deserve to have research into their own experiences so that we can improve healthcare for them. And so for future research, we need further exploration into the facilitators and barriers for optimal care for aromantic patients to improve health access and outcomes. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tabitha, for that wonderful presentation. Lastly, our last presentation from AeroUQ, we have John, who will be diving into the experience of intra-community discrimination that aromantic people face within queer communities. Over to you, John.
Hi everybody, my name is John and I've been working as part of the AeroUQ team for a little while now. I'm a student of public health and I'm delighted to be here today presenting our research into aromantic people's experiences of intra-community discrimination within the queer community. Right away, I do want to preface that I do not identify as aromantic. I do identify as queer, however, and very much part of the queer community. And what this means is that I was approaching the data from two perspectives: an insider to the queer community who knows very much what queer spaces can look like, but also as an outsider to aromantic perspectives and experiences. There was a lot of self-reflection involved in this research for me and for my team, and through this we hope to deliver an accurate and affirming presentation of the data. I also need to content warn that this presentation will contain vivid examples of discrimination faced by aromantic people, and this may cause distress for some viewers. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm presenting today. My team is based in Brisbane, Australia, the land of the Turrbal and Jagera people. I pay my deep respects to elders past, present, and emerging, as well as to traditional owners all across the globe. So, a little background to this research. ICD is when members of the same social group discriminate against each other. You might also know this as lateral violence or lateral aggression, but the team and I decided not to use these terms. This is because the queer community is already a place with lots of different intersecting identities, and the word lateral implies that the perpetrator and the target share an equal power status. Of course, while everyone in the queer community is a minority within a cis-het society, different intersecting identities have been identified to result in a hierarchy within the community, where different identities possess different power statuses. This feeds into my next point, which is that research about ICD in the queer community, more generally, is extremely limited. However, what research does exist shows that people are more likely to experience ICD based off existing power structures. For example, bisexual people, POC, and less conventionally attractive people may be targets because they're associated with stereotypes that paint them as less able to attain sexual/romantic relationships. To date, there is no empirical understanding of ICD about aromantic people. What research does exist largely exists in the form of online community-controlled research forums, which suggest that aromantic people experience significant amounts of discrimination based on their identity. Amentanormativity may be a useful framework to understand this discrimination, and this is the normative belief that all persons inherently pursue love and romance in order to lead a rich and fulfilling life. This is a pervasive paradigm, and the queer community often relies on this standard to promote positive social change for itself. Love is love is a potent example of this. Amentanormativity means that the discrimination faced by aromantic people, including from within the queer community, is likely to be different to other identities underneath the queer umbrella. This is an important topic to understand because ICD has been shown to cause heightened senses of loneliness, isolation, and invisibility that see affected members disengage from communities altogether. This is meaningful because socially connected persons are better able to access identity-specific support, and a united community can function as an effective platform for positive social change. Research should endeavour to understand the unique experiences of all identities underneath the queer umbrella, including those of aromantic people. So, with all that considered, the aim of this research was to answer the question, what are the experiences of ICD faced by aromantic people in the queer community? And to answer this, we drew data from an online survey that many of you undoubtedly filled out. For my section, I reviewed the 1,280 responses to the question, have you experienced discrimination from other people within the queer community based on your aromantic identity? And for me, this meant taking data points and putting them into groups according to their most obvious meaning, and then organizing these again into themes according to their latent meaning. Many hours, sticky notes, and drafts later, here I am bringing the research full circle by presenting it back to the community. I really hope you're able to feel a sense of ownership over this data because it is your data and these are your stories. So without further ado, let's get into the results of this research. The thematic analysis identified 3 themes and 3 associated sub-themes. Theme 1 highlights that the presence of discrimination against aromantic people in queer spaces is highly evident, though it may not have manifested itself visibly yet for some members. Many respondents said they hadn't experienced discrimination because the queer community is a very kind and inclusive space, which is wonderful. However, many participants intertwine this perception of the community with luck, and that specifically they were lucky to have accepting friends in the community. This notion of luck intercepted with another prevalent theme in the data, the anticipation of discrimination. For many participants, this anticipatory relationship to discrimination manifested in a range of protective behaviors. It was common for participants to be careful who they came out to, and for others, it simply wasn't something they talked about. As one participant said, they remain closeted due to a fear of lateral aggression. Theme 2 really is the big one here, and it shows that for participants who directly experience discrimination, these attitudes were governed by ignorance and misunderstanding about aromanticism. And really, this culminates in the exclusion of aromantic people from the queer community. So, sub-theme 1 pertains to the following line of discrimination. Some members of the queer community recognize that aromanticism is a valid identity, however, not one that belongs in the queer community. So some discrimination followed that in order to be part of the queer community, you have to experience sexual/romantic attraction, and that a lack of attraction is not a queer identity. For some, this followed that aromanticism is closer related to heterosexuality than any form of queerness. Participants also said they'd been told they weren't queer enough to be part of the community. And this idea of enoughness presents itself again when participants were told they weren't discriminated against enough, or that their identity wasn't important enough to be talked about or discussed publicly, because this would only take away resources from more deserving, more discriminated against identities. This data shows that some aromantic people are subjected to an uncompassionate, unfair, and abstract threshold of queerness based on attraction and discrimination that people must meet in order to be considered part of the community. Sub-theme 2 is about those who don't recognize aromanticism as a valid identity at all, and therefore as an identity that doesn't belong anywhere, let alone the queer community. Perhaps the most common line under this theme was that aromanticism is just a phase, or they haven't met the right person yet. And here we can see amantinormative viewpoints coming through, because this narrative reinforces that all people experience love and romance. And this feeds another misconception about aromanticism, that it's a trauma response, which causes people to hide their true identities or become afraid of commitment. And it's at this point that the discrimination faced by aromantic people actively steps into territory that undoubtedly seeks to cause the community harm. For example, many people had been told they were just straights trying to be special, or just trying to be discriminated against and wanted attention. This particular narrative followed on to an even more malicious portrayal of aromantic people, that they were actually straight and homophobic individuals, purposefully invading the queer community to steal resources and destroy the community from within. Sub-theme 3 stands between sub-theme 1 and 2. And here, people who discriminate against aromantic people recognize that aromanticism exists, but ultimately associate the identity with characteristics that shame, humiliate, and dehumanize aromantic people. A lot of participants pointed out that love is love can be a hurtful concept for aromantic people, and that this paves the way for discourse that paints aromantic people as broken, cold, and unfeeling. Building upon this, many participants had been called manipulative or predatory for supposedly desiring sexual relationships without a romantic component. These viewpoints again draw on an amantinormative viewpoint, positing that the pursuit of love and romance is so integral to the human condition that for this to be lacking in a person, it fundamentally changes the nature of their humanness. Up to this point, we've been talking about the actual experiences of discrimination, but theme 3 steps up and details the effects of this. And ultimately, ICD saw many participants feel unwelcome in or pushed out of the queer community. Many participants described the negative effects that ICD had in terms of isolation, poor self-esteem, and confusion. For some participants, being unable to connect with an inclusive and understanding community, especially one that dispelled any feelings of isolation, barred them from connecting with their aromantic identity. As this person here on the right described, ICD foreshadowed internalized discrimination, which barred them from connecting with themselves. I'd like to end this presentation with a discussion about what this research can actually mean for the aromantic and wider queer community. And really, what I want this section to accomplish is to demonstrate how valuable a greater inclusion of aromanticism in the queer community can be. So this research has shown that aromantic people are susceptible to significant amounts of ICD. And of course, discrimination is well known to foreshadow a range of poor mental and physical health outcomes like anxiety or depression. It's also well known that a connection to community and identity-specific support, especially for minority groups, can serve as a protective factor against the effects of discrimination. Therefore, aromantic people stand to benefit greatly from a greater inclusion of aromanticism in queer spaces based on a shared identity of being queer. Of course, though, queer communities are diverse. So if not a queer community, it's important that aromantic people are connected with other safe aromantic communities. It's also worth noting that this better inclusion would benefit the wider queer community as well. And to illustrate this, I'd like to bring the conversation back to amantinormativity, which can be seen as having a negative impact on both the aromantic and wider queer community. You might say the most tangible manifestation of amantinormativity is the institution of marriage, which largely exists to legitimize monogamous, heterosexual, long-term cohabiting relationships centered on procreation, all the while delegitimizing other relationships that do not fit this mold. For this reason, marriage equality under the banner Love is Love has been criticized as trying to validate queer relationships within a decidedly not queer context. And of course, queer communities across the globe continue to suffer harassment and shame for being unable to conform to a heteronormative standard rooted in an amatonormative society. As such, acknowledging and embracing diverse aromantic perspectives and understanding and deconstructing amantinormativity has the potential to be very valuable for the queer community. A united, diverse, and inclusive queer community can provide a strong foundation from which to launch collective action that supports all identities underneath the queer umbrella. And really, this demonstrates the key finding of this paper, which is that awareness, knowledge, and connection are essential when rethinking the nature of queer communities to be more inclusive for all identities. Thank you so much for allowing me to present my findings today. I'm really proud to have been a part of this project, and I'm even more proud to be able to uplift aromantic voices in partnership, of course, with the aromantic community, and I look forward to taking your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John, for that very fascinating presentation. And thank you to everyone from AeroUQ who has shared your hard work with us today. And we're all really looking forward to seeing where your research goes next, especially if it continues to involve aromantic voices. Thank you for all the work that you do to uplift us. So let's bring James, Tabitha, and John back to answer some of your questions. Seeing if any questions have been posted in the Zoom chat. I would say as needed, James, to let the interpreters be as visible as possible. It seems that there are no questions from the chat since nothing's been posted into the Zoom meeting. But would either James, Tabitha, or John like to share where people can contact you if they have questions they didn't feel comfortable asking publicly? All right, I assume that someone from the team will be putting those emails in the chat. Thank you for sharing. So, if there are no present questions. We have some questions from Aurea staff members. All right. Oh, not Aurea staff members, my apologies. That is a question from the chat. Someone was wondering what started Aero UQ in the first place.
I feel like that might be a question for me to answer. So essentially, I, for about 5 years, have known an incredible aromantic advocate called Alex Crook, who I know works or previously worked with Aurea. And it was essentially that we were working together on different community projects with different organizations we were working for. And I'd started a research job, and we both just said, well, hey, there's no research here. And Alex was sharing that because there's no research, it's hard to get validation for their identity to prove that it's not something that's just in their head or made up. And these really stigmatizing experiences, which we've seen throughout all of our presentations today. So that's where this research came from, and we kind of just put our heads together, and no money, lots of volunteer time from lots of different people, incredible students along the way too. And that's really how this has kind of come up together.
That's such a lovely motivation to start a project like this. Thank you so much, James, for answering that. Got another question from chat. I assume this is for everyone who has presented today. Will the slides from your presentations be available online for later reading? Anyone is welcome to jump in and say, or I can read out your messages from the chat.
This is Cassie from PrideNet. I think I've been talking with my communications team, and we're going to try to figure that out. We might see if there's a way to like put the slides into the video recording to like post it all together, if that's helpful. You can also reach out to me directly with my email too.
Lovely, thank you for sharing where we can access your slides, Cassie. James has also said in the chat that he is happy to share his slides, and his email should be in the chat for anyone who is interested in getting in contact. Another question from the chat that isn't for anyone in particular, so anyone is welcome to jump in and answer it. Why is marriage considered an inherently cishet construction if there are queer people of all genders who find happiness and meaning in marrying their partner? Isn't marriage equality a net good?
Oh, hello. I think that might be a question for me. So, oh yeah, sorry, there's an addendum to that. Yes, you're very welcome. I'm very glad to be presenting this research. Comment where there was a thanks for presenting. Yes, it's a big moment, this one. So marriage equality is certainly a net good, and I'm a big proponent of that. It's just that within the context of the research that I did, it was sort of trying to argue that marriage equality could be positively oriented and related to a cishet construction, and that this can have negative implications for some queer people and some queer identities trying to fully attain their queer lifestyle in the face of that. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you for answering that question, John. Are there any other questions from people watching us on YouTube? All right, nothing has been posted, but if you do still have questions, you are welcome to ask them while we begin wrapping this up, and I'm sure that we'll be able to get to them in time. Oh, yes, final amount. Okay. Gonna wait for someone behind the scenes to post that. Oh, lovely. All right. So, as you're all probably very aware, during this live stream, we have been doing a fundraiser to help with some behind the scenes costs of keeping Aurea running this year. And thanks to all of your help, you have helped us raise $700, $100 beyond our goal for keeping Aurea up and running this year. We are all so, so grateful for your generosity and support. Whether your donation was big or small, it's going to make a huge difference in helping to keep Aurea running and serving the aromantic community for the next year. Again, if you're interested to know where your donation will be going, our annual financial report is available on our website through the link in the description. And as Anyang mentioned in the beginning, and I mentioned in the middle of this live stream, we are looking for new team members. We are hoping to become an official nonprofit organization. And as Anyang explained, we need a bigger team to make that happen. If what you've seen from us today has piqued your interest and you want to get involved in the work we do, you can find information about our currently vacant positions at aromanticism.org, also linked in the description. To begin wrapping everything up, we want to extend a huge thank you to the lovely people from PrideNet and AeroUQ for helping to make this live stream possible and for allowing aromantic people to have their voices heard in academia. It's been lovely to work with you all on these projects, and the work that you do is always appreciated. And we're so excited to see where we'll be with aromantic research a year from now. Secondly, I and everyone else who has been front and center in this live stream would like to thank the behind the scenes staff who have been working tirelessly throughout this live stream to help make it run as smoothly as possible. We have had some issues, but we'd like to say a big thank you to everyone watching for being patient while we figured all of this out. Again, if you want to help us with our next live streams, please consider volunteering. Anyone proficient with Zoom streaming would be more than welcome to join us. And lastly, another thank you to Pro Bono ASL and Juniper Castaway and Jay Raby for making this event as accessible as possible. And another thank you to PrideNet for helping us fund this service. Thank you for being patient while we've been fixing all of these technical issues. Again, if you'd like to help us with live streams in the future, please consider volunteering. We hope you've all had as much of a good time watching or listening to all of this lovely research as we have showcasing it to you. And we hope to see you again next year for Aromantic Spectrum Awareness Week 2025. Happy Time Zone, everyone.